Welcome, my darling pretties, to our Beyond the Dawn of Business podcast for pretty, empowered female entrepreneurs. It's time to step into your power, pretties. Lift each other, support the squad, and choose a life filled with the autonomy and freedom to live your dreams. I'm your host, Dawn Beth, owner and founder of Beyond the Dawn digital business brand and agency. My coffee is hot and my eyelashes are on, so we are ready to go. Hi and welcome to this episode. I am delighted today to be welcoming a lovely lady, Léa Cléret, to come to our podcast and talk to me today about what it is like being a hard-hitting, impactful female CEO. Hi darling, welcome to the podcast.
Hi Dawn, thank you for having me. It's always such a pleasure to have a chat with you.
It's so nice to have you here. So I generally give my guests the opportunity to introduce themselves because I think you guys do a far better job than I could ever do. Do you want to let our listeners know who you are and what you do?
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Léa and I'm passionate about lots of things. I'm passionate about humans. And right now the role I have is that I am Chief Executive for a company called Leadership Trust. And Leadership Trust specialises in experiential learning applied to leadership development. So we use emotions to help people grow their self-awareness and develop the skills that compose leadership. And we do that because our vision is to enable positive social impact by revealing possibility and energizing change for a critical mass of authentic leaders. So leaders at the moment, we need a lot of very good ones. So yes. Our job is to educate as many wonderful people as we can to the art of leadership.
Love it. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed hearing from you when we've connected recently is the steeped history that the company that you are CEO of, the whole history that Leadership Trust has. Do you want to talk us through a little bit about where Leadership Trust came from and that kind of like steeped origin story?
Yes, gosh, this organisation really is an incredible place to work. It was set up in the mid-70s by a retired Special Forces officer called David Gilbert Smith. And in the 70s, the economic situation in the UK was really quite difficult, and he thought that the leadership development training they did for Special Forces officers would readily transfer to the captains of industry. And now leadership development is a standard thing, but back in the 70s it absolutely did not exist. Yeah. So he set up a foundation, and the aim of which was to make leadership development a normal thing that everyone should be educated to. So that job, I think now in 2022, leadership development is something that a lot of people do. But so he set up this centre in the beautiful Wye Valley in Herefordshire. And what I love about the story is that he came with the Special Forces side, the leadership development training they did for them. But then he met a wonderful lady called Janet Richardson, and she was a behavioural psychologist. And they fell in love, and so it really is the course that we still run today. It's the same design as 45 years ago, and it really is their baby, and it's still that design that we're running today. And what's particularly interesting for me is that the research in behavioral psychology didn't exist at that point to be able to design what they did based on data, but 30 years on, all of the research exists, and it's confirmed that this type of education of using emotion to develop your self-awareness, it has been proven to work. So there's something quite magical about the course there. So it's had a wonderful history. I think we have more than 80,000 people who have experienced the course. It's been life-changing, the way that it's designed. So whoever you are, whatever your skills are, you will have a number of breakthroughs during and after, and 5 years after, and 30 years after the course. So it's a wonderful, wonderful place to work, and the object of what we do is just so uplifting. When we run courses, you can actually see people going through transformation, and it's just goosebump moment after goosebump moment. So we absolutely love what we do.
Oh, I love it, and I love talking to you about it. We've obviously discussed leadership trust a little bit when we've connected last year, and one of the things that I really loved about talking to you, Léa, is that I just feel so incredibly aligned to your overall mission, and that opportunity to expand people's possibilities and give them the opportunity to really kind of figure out this level of self-awareness that perhaps they haven't had the tools to do by themselves. And that's why I really wanted to speak to you as well, because this kind of theme that I'm running through the podcast at the moment is to give people who are listening, and I have a lot of fantastic listeners that are in corporate roles or are looking to develop themselves in multiple different ways. I want to give them the opportunity to say that actually there is the possibility for strong female leaders to be there, to be making these social changes in the right energy, using the right tools. And like you say, we do have the data, we do have the science now. It's never been more available. So it's just a great opportunity for us to use those things to our advantage. In terms of your life and your career, how did you end up being a CEO?
Completely by accident. But before I go into that, Dawn, I just have to highlight the huge quality of the work that you do, and the impact that you've had on me. Even though we've discussed, we've had chats a few times. Your energy and the demeanor, and the way you go about your work. It has had its impact on me. So I think you do a fabulous job already in supporting so many to growing to their best potential.
Oh, thank you.
So how did I become... Oh, sorry, I think I've got a bit of a delay from you, but it's okay. Absolutely heartfelt.
Thank you so much.
So how did I become a CEO? I think it was a bit by accident, although the person who offered me the job would probably say it was completely by design. But I actually don't have a background in business at all. And I think that is a message I want to put out there, is that CEO is a fantastic role, and I absolutely love my job, and I'll talk about that a bit after. But my background is philosophy. So I have a Ph.D. in moral philosophy, and what I'm passionate about is how humans make decisions about how they're going to behave. And the beginning of my career was in drugs. So I was with an organization called the World Anti-Doping Agency, and my job was to understand why athletes engaged in performance-enhancing substances. Then it was to develop the prevention programs based on the knowledge we'd uncovered through research. And then it was to have an advocacy role with the sport governing bodies to get them to implement prevention programs. And then I got asked to do the same thing in corruption. So I do dabble in some really nice stuff.
But in order to help people in the right directions, you have to go where the work is, right?
Exactly. So my job was to understand how athletes would get. So match fixing is one of the big forms of corruption in sports. So when athletes get paid to deliberately lose, and that's linked to illegal betting. And so my job was to try and get athletes to not do that. And then it was, for me, it was, I sort of had a moment, because we were trying to get all of these athletes to behave in a very moral way. And then other people in the organization were, doing all of the wrong things. And there was a clash in my head of how can I be asking all of these people to behave in a certain way when everyone else is doing exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
So that's when I started working with leadership trust, because I really loved the methodology. So I didn't know them prior to that. But the experiential methodology of getting people to feel certain things, to recognize and be able to anticipate behaviours, for me was really interesting in the case of corruption, because corruption, it's not something you wake up one day and think, today I'm going to take a bribe. It's a very slow grooming process that the organised crime is very good at doing. So that's how I got working with Leadership Trust on this project. And then there was an opportunity that came around to become the CEO of the organisation. And the organisation was going through a massive culture change, and I think that's why the owner of the company asked me to take the reins, because it wasn't so much about the business side of the business, it really was about the culture. And the one thing actually that made me take the job was this incredible team of women that were already working in the business, and I could see how hard they were working and how competent they were at their jobs. And I was like, well, if we gave them the space to be able to do their job, like, this is going to be fireworks all over the place.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a bit of a scary decision to make, because I had no business background whatsoever. At that point, I had a sort of my relationship with money, I'd never been involved in a professional setting in any revenue generating activity. So, suddenly I'm in business and it's about money. And when you've been working in not-for-profit and non-governmental organizations, going to the for-profit sector suddenly was a bit of a, what's the word? It was almost a betrayal. Suddenly you're no longer, you no longer have a higher purpose. You're going down to the dirty business making world. So
there is that disconnect.
There was a lot
there is that disconnect and the feeling around it. I've been able to marry those two feelings quite seamlessly. But what you're saying there is absolutely right. That oftentimes we do feel like you can't have that moral purpose and be inherently business and financially driven at the same time. That's such a great point to make, Léa.
Absolutely. And I think that people like you and I have got a role in dispelling that myth, because I've worked with or I've been around not-for-profit organisations that are very toxic places to work with, that have completely lost sight of their purpose. And I've worked with for-profit businesses that are making a huge difference to the world, and that are amazing groups of people. So I think in this day and age, we have to be very careful that the structure of the organisation doesn't predispose the good that's happening. And I think that the alignment that you can find in some business, where the value that you're generating, creates the wealth that goes with it, and it's not because you're a for-profit or that you're a foundation, that basically the structure, the legal structure behind your business shouldn't define the good you're doing to the world. So that was a long answer to say how I became CEO.
I love that though, because I think in terms of for females who are looking at their situation and considering what parts they want to play in the world, especially in a world that's dealing with the kind of things that our world is dealing with, at the moment, it can be kind of difficult to understand that culturally there are some things that have shifted that haven't quite made it to the masses yet in terms of comprehension. for females to have that opportunity to be part of something that is extremely meaningful, to be part of something that is extremely purposeful, and still to be able to make good money and be involved in money and being involved in how money is spent and having power and influence in that space that actually could create some good for the world. And it's a little bit like taking care of your own little garden patch, isn't it? Like your own little vegetable patch. If you are in your corner of the world doing good things, that's never going to create bad things. But we tend to have this disconnect between being able to earn money and have influence and power. I use that word very loosely because I feel feminine power is slightly different to, again, the comprehension of the stacked feeling the word power has. But our own power to actually do good things and to do things that we're passionate about, and to have that autonomy that perhaps we previously have not been, we've not had the space to do so for such a long time when it comes to, the history of things. And I think in terms of leading with emotion and leading with energy, these are things that previously we've been taught to maybe not to be proper business. Like you have to have something tangible and practical, and these aren't proper business assets. When in fact, every time I speak to somebody wonderful like yourself, one of the things that comes through for me is always just this amazing energy, this amazing spirit, this feminine energy that is so powerful and so brilliant for business that it's a little bit strange that it's always been denied.
I know, and I think that's why the work that you're doing now, Dawn, is so important, to get the message out there that making money is not a bad thing, that women making money is not a bad thing, and it is possible, and that the more good we do in the world, the more authentic we are, the more we're going to make a difference. And you're right, most of the time when we talk about businesses in the wider media, it's to say what bad things a business has done. And, because of the representation of who runs the business, statistically at the moment, there are still many, many more men who run businesses than women. So there's this sort of picture that we end up having in our head of what business means, which is it does bad things, and who do I have to be able to run a business? And it's, a very certain stereotype of CEO, and I just can't commend your work enough to, busting all of those myths about, what a CEO looks like. You're looking at one right now. I'm a mixed race woman. I started my first CEO position aged 36. I had no clue about business, no clue about money, and we pivoted the business, and we've done absolutely fabulous work. So where I was lucky, and I think that that's probably the feminine side, is that the reason I joined the company was out of a form of universal love to the team that was already there, and I could see these amazing people. And even though I didn't have the business side, for me, I just thought, well, I'm just going to work extremely hard to deserve their respect and to deserve them following me in whatever direction I'm going to take. So I need to, make sure I go in the right direction. And I think that, if more people knew that was possible, it wouldn't be such a stretch for people to start thinking, well, maybe I could do that job, maybe I could set up my own business. And when it comes to money, I think, we see a lot of very rich people at the moment, and we know that the divide in between the very, very rich are getting richer, and they're getting further removed from the rest of us. And the more people start making money, and the more people start spending money on doing good things, that the more we're going to perhaps reverse the direction of travel that we all seem to be going down at the moment. So I can develop into leading operations like these where you can really end up making a big difference. And it's not so much about the object of your company. You know, if you run an apple juice factory and you treat your people well and you make sure that you're running a functional business where everyone has a role to play and everyone is valued and you're generating that wealth, that in itself is a really, really important part of the puzzle. You don't have to be inventing, clean energy machines to be making a real contribution. And I think that that's often overlooked, that just being a nice business person is a massive contribution to making the world a better place.
I love that. And I think that is such a valuable idea for us to consider, because sometimes we do get kind of caught up in this profound nature of our work. And in fact, actually, just being a decent human being and just contributing, like you said, positively is actually really, really impactful and not necessarily too far outside of our comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I think, that whole idea of valuing your people, I love that, because I think that so many people that I've come across, one of the reasons why they've looked at different opportunities for themselves or they've started up their own businesses is because at some point in their history they have felt like they had more to give and that potential was being overlooked, and perhaps that person might not have quite felt as valued as they would have liked to have felt. And I think just simple things like that quite rightly, like you say, it's simple and it's easy and it doesn't have to have this massive kind of outward impact, but it will still have that ripple effect. It will still have an impact. And for the people who are in that organisation, it's massive. It's life-changing.
It is, and it really, really should not be underestimated. Even if you're in a small business, so if I go back to my apple juice factory, even if you've just got 10 people working in your company, if it's 10 people that you pay properly, that are happy to come into work, it means that it's 10 people who are better partners, better parents, who, contribute, outwardly in a better way. And that in itself, job done. If everyone was like that, we'd have a much better place to be. So I think really not underestimating the power of just being a decent human being is so important.
I'm suddenly feeling like we should be running for office or something, Léa. All of a sudden I can see lots of things that I feel like we could help the bigger corporations and government structures in our world with. I think we've just figured it out. That's the answer to the universe and everything right there.
Exactly. Job done. Vote for us.
That's job done. That's our 42. Thank you, everybody, and good night. I mean, if only it was as easy as just saying, be a decent human. But I think you're so right in that we can get caught up in whether we are being a perfect version of ourselves and not allowing ourselves that kind of inner compassion and kindness when it comes to really striving for doing good things and being better people on a personal level, when actually simple changes like that can make such a massive difference. And I loved what you said about how if you pay people well and they're happy in their jobs, they are better parents, they're better partners, they're better people in the outside world. Because I think that's kind of like the golden nugget that is so often missed. If you are the person who is adding to the pressure, who's adding to the pain, who's adding to the stress, then you're not going to get not only the right performance from your people, the right support from your people, the right energy from your people, but you're also contributing to all the other external factors that might be weighing them down and changing who the landscape of that person will be outwardly as well. So it gives a lot of force to just such a really simple, but like you said, something not to be underestimated.
Absolutely. And we had an example here, and it was, for me, it really highlights the power of you being enough. So we had a guy come on one of our courses, and I had a chat with him, and he was beautifully candid with me, and he said, well, I came onto the course, and my life up until then, it had been, pretty much easy-go-lucky, not getting too committed, not getting too involved, sort of breezing through my world. And then he said, but, I was adopted, and so my inner belief was that I was easily disposable, and my ideas and suggestions could also be easily disposable. So he came onto the course, and he had, this amazing breakthrough moment, and he explained to me his return back home, and his little daughter ran up to him, Daddy, Daddy, and he just got very emotional, and his wife was like, what's going on? And he said, I'm worth something. And from then on, so of course, his career got a lot better, he got a lot more involved with work, more committed, everywhere else, but he started getting involved with charities that focus on adoption, and he became a spokesperson for the movement. He got very involved in changing some of the legislation about adoption, and he's had a massive impact on that. And it was really just a matter of him becoming his authentic self, becoming comfortable with who he was, developing that self-awareness and learning how to relate better with the outside world. And the direct impact of that was him, his relationship with his partner, with his children, and with the impact he's had on the world, which has led to massive progress in the adoption process. And, that can't be,
wow.
that's just, I think that says it all, No further comment, Your Honour.
Yeah. No further comment. That's a mic drop moment. And what I love about that is there's this theme that I talk all the time, and you probably will have heard me say it before, but I talk to my people all the time about the ripple effect, the things that you perhaps can't always tell that you started, but then has a positive effect on the outskirts. And you don't have to know where that ripple ends, you just have to know that you were a part of that positive change somewhere in the journey. And I love that idea, that breakthrough and something that you have provided in terms of that person's perspective on themselves is so different that it has made those other positive changes that at the beginning of the journey you could never have predicted, you could never have forecasted. And that is such a beautiful thing. This is one of the things we do in our agency and with my teaching, which is a little bit unorthodox in the marketing spectrum, is that because we use positive psychology as part of our marketing framework, we do not necessarily work on just numbers and metrics. I mean, we do obviously work on numbers and metrics because we have to have the data, and we are just, in our own little world, we are little science geeks, but at the same time we really do kind of have value. We add value to the ideas of the things that we can't right now measure, that there are things that are happening that you can't necessarily get a metric on right at this moment, and we give weight to that, we give power to that, because it's like a little bit like if you're on Facebook and you're posting all of the time and that the reach is a certain amount but you're not getting the same level of engagement, you might think, well, that post is rubbish. We're looking at how many people had eyes on that, and how many lurkers, for lack of a better term, had a positive change by seeing that day. Like, we can't measure it because they didn't do anything with it other than potentially look at it, but we're still giving value to that idea that something good has happened beyond what we can immediately see. And that's a very similar kind of ideal, and I love that. I think if everybody had that feeling about what they did, they would worry less about taking the step and take more action.
Absolutely. You're absolutely spot on, and I really love that idea, and all the work that you do on, the marketing and, the sales on the back of it, and, trying to make positive change through that method of marketing. I think is, marketing is everywhere, and it's so important that it's done well and properly. So thank you for that.
But yeah, it is. It's just one of those. It's one of those small themes that make us just a little bit different. And I think sometimes, especially in our industry, it can be a bit difficult for us to show those things because, again, there's almost like an archaic way that things are done. And if you step out of line of the way things are done, you are rocking the boat a tad too much. And we really, really love having the opportunity to actually completely make our own rules based on what we believe is the right way. And it's a little bit like what you were saying about the course that was created in the 70s. That behavioural science data wasn't there, but there was a trust in that situation, there was a trust in that course, and then it comes through to fruition that actually now that is measurable and it is absolutely, right on, which I love that. And I think that there is that whole feeling of that there should be a level of allowing yourself to trust in the things that you feel and to trust in, have a little bit of faith in perhaps the things that you can't immediately measure.
You're absolutely right, and I think that's perhaps what you were referring to a new style of management. And earlier we were talking about fear and how a lot of the time fear gets in the way, and the fear that we're not the establishment or we're not part of the established way of doing things, and that getting in the way of you actually starting doing the things you want to do in the way that you want to do them, because that's not how they are currently being done. And I think, whatever we can do to show people that, business has existed in a certain way and it's been run in a certain way for many, many years as a result of, the world as it stood. But there are lots of different ways to make business that also work, and we don't have yet the data to show that it's true. And that's where I'm starting to get excited, because in my job, the way I did the pivot of the business, I did it in a completely non-finance driven way. I did it purely from a people, behaviour, team transformation way, and it's proved to have been incredibly successful. And so we could probably have achieved the same way using a different method and probably being more numbers driven, but now I can show that way of doing things also works. So, yes, of course it can be improved, and if I had to do it again, would there be things I'd do differently with what I know now? Yes, of course, but not starting something because of the perceptions we have and the limiting self-beliefs that we have. I always love that story with Sarah Blakely and Spanx and how she started, and when she used to go and visit knicker factories, and she'd turn up and she'd have people with clipboards say deciding whether knickers were comfortable or not, and then she wanted to do it differently, and everyone would tell her no, that's not the way you do it, and she did it anyway. And we all know the success of Spanx and of Sarah Blakely after that. So trailblazing, it can be scary, but if you feel it and that's what you firmly believe in, it's always worth a try.
Yeah, and I love that you, whenever we talk about things like this, you always bring it back to that area of alignment. And if you feel it, and if you can actually have what is right for you in terms of your energetic capacity, because it can make everything so much easier if you have that understanding of yourself and what you want to do. Being a thought leader is not easy, and ripping up the rule book, especially when everyone around you is telling you that this is gospel, is so hard. And yet we know from the people that we've experienced in the industry and the friends that we have that now that we're working in the ways that we do, that actually that can be the genius of the piece, that can be the thing that is missing, and can very often be the thing that makes a change in industries that need a change, that need that shake up.
I could not agree more.
There you are.
Sorry, I could not agree more, Dawn. That is, I'm going to write it on a T-shirt, and I'm going to remember that all the time. And I have so many examples of when I first started, where I had, people coming. I had a lot of unsolicited advice when I started out, and people coming to tell me, how to run the business and the decisions that should be made and all of that. And I didn't agree with most of the advice that was being provided, and it can be very discouraging, and I can understand why people would have the fear that if they do it their own way, it's just not going to work. Then I think trust your instincts, and the way that things are isn't necessarily the way they should be, and if you can contribute it in a different way. And I think that's a really good reframe, that your way of doing things can provide you with the niche that you need to be successful in business. And that is really difficult, and it does take a lot of self-confidence to be able to do self-confidence, or just completely ignoring your imposter syndrome. Knowing that it's there and just plainly ignoring it. But the way that I know that the way that newcomers run business, the sort of challenges in business, that's always because they can see a different way of doing things and they go for it. So go for it.
Yeah, and I love that, because I remember feeling like I had lots of ideas and lots of things that I wanted to do, and not being in a position that I had the autonomy to actually make the decisions and see them through and test them out and do those things. And there's nothing more frustrating than being that visionary and having the ideas of how things could be, and then being stopped or being unable because of circumstance to execute them and give it a try. So I think if you're in a position where you are lucky enough to have that level of autonomy, and you can try these things and do these things, if it feels inherently comfortable for you, then you definitely should. And one of the things that I think is, it's come to light a few times for me, and let me know if you agree, Léa, but I think that sometimes, especially for female leaders, there has to be a level of inner work and self-awareness for ourselves, for us to unlock what those things would be, and where we feel comfortable, and where we actually want to be to make those changes. I know these things happened to me in my 30s, because that's the age where I started to explore, which it seems ridiculous when I say it out loud, but that was the age where I wanted to explore who I really was as a woman, and what I was actually going to do whilst I was here. And I started to mature in a way where it wasn't just about coasting through life anymore. It was actually about figuring out, what is my purpose here? What do I want to bring to the table? And that seems to be a common theme throughout so many of the amazing female leaders that we look up to and that we know.
I couldn't agree more, Dawn. I invest massively in my personal development and my continuous professional learning. I absolutely would not be where I am, and I would not have had the strength to do what I did if I hadn't had the development and the support. So I'm very, very candid with the fact that I have coaches, and I have different coaches for different things. I see a therapist once a month. I keep learning new stuff, so I'm taking my pilot license at the moment. I'm always trying new experiences. I can see your face. Yes!
I'm so excited for you. I didn't know you were doing that. That's amazing.
I'll come and pick you up. We'll go for lunch somewhere cool.
That'd be wonderful. I'm in.
But yeah, the personal development and the support is so key in any form of success, because actually the definition of performance that Leadership Trust uses is that performance equals potential minus interference. So performance isn't about doing more and finding ways to be able to work harder. It really is about understanding what's getting in the way of you reaching your potential. And you can do that alone, but it takes a lot of time, and it's a lot more painful that if you get support. So a lot of, I talk about Roger Federer, and I'm like, Roger Federer is, in my view, the best tennis player in the world, and he has a coach, and no one is going to go and tell Roger Federer that he's got a coach because he doesn't know how to play tennis. A coach is just outside of you, providing you with information that you can't see because simply of where you're standing. And the support that I got, so the latest piece of coaching I'm doing, which is absolutely amazing, has to do around money blocks. And women's relationship with money is a very, very complex relationship because it's linked to self-worth, it's linked to boundaries, it's linked to over delivering and undervaluing your so I can see we've all been there, and if I hadn't done that piece of work,
preaching to the converted.
So definitely, personal development and that support, and a lot of the insecurities that limit us in our business ventures, if you work them through with a coach or a therapist or whoever you decide to want to support you, all of those just give indications as to what your blockers are, so you can work on those, you can address the business issue differently. And I know that I've had a lot of situations where my initial thought was to go in a certain direction, and then having worked it through with someone looking at it from the outside, I ended up making a decision that was completely different, which was much better for the business. And the only reason I was going to make the initial decision was either out of fear or out of insecurity or whatever other blocker I may have had. So I can't say that enough. The investment in yourself, in getting the user guide of who you are. At the moment I'm flying aeroplanes, I'm learning how to fly aeroplanes. You can get your pilot license, sort of within a 60-hour learning period, and that's quite a simple machine compared to being a human being. So who has spent 60 hours on learning their own user guide? Would you go out in an aeroplane without having been given the user guide and being shown how it works? You probably wouldn't, and I would definitely advise against it. But whoever gave you your own user guide, how do you know how you're set up, what you react to particularly, what's stopping you, and all of those things. And if you can spend a bit of time learning about that, then it's like suddenly you've got the keys to your own Ferrari. That's who you are. We're all these incredible machines. And given the keys and the user guide, you're pretty much limitless as to what you can go out and do. And even if what you want to do is have a chilled life, somewhere nice and, not going down the road. And I think that's a message I also want to support, is that the, high achievement, we're definitely in a world of high performance and, high achievers and, delivering a lot of stuff. And, I do want to chip back in that it's perfectly fine to just be happy at work and find your fulfillment outside of work. And, if you're not an entrepreneur, that's absolutely fine. Just make sure that you're deciding, that you're not just making the decision that you're not an entrepreneur out of fear, but if you just naturally aren't, that's absolutely fine too.
Yeah, I love that. And I had a really good conversation, a really interesting conversation with a friend of mine recently, where we had noticed the rise of the traumapreneur, which is perhaps somebody who has gone into that world, gone into that life based on a previous trauma, whether that be a work trauma or a life trauma, that has then given them this sense of lacking in self-worth, and by trying to bridge that gap and create this idea that they were a high performance, a high delivering, person, that it gave them that sense of self-worth, because that initial sense of worth was missing. And that just breaks my heart, because although everybody has some trauma, like we all have some trauma somewhere, and that's just, that's how it is. So here we are. The idea that the motivation behind it or the purpose behind it is still in this feeling of scarcity or lack in yourself as a human, that you're looking at yourself like you're not a Ferrari, that breaks my heart, because the potential is there. And what you said is so right. With the right tools and the user guide and the keys, you absolutely can be limitless. There is nothing to stop you, and it's about figuring out what those real deeper level of intentions are for you. What are the real reasons that you're doing what you're doing? Like you said, is it because of fear? Is there some other block there that's actually kind of swaying your decision or changing your perception? And these are all like really wonderful conversations that I feel like, especially you and I, Léa, we could probably sit here and ponder this all day. Like we could probably do a day festival of conversation around this subject. But for the women that are listening right now that are in that impasse in their lives, that are considering what is available to them in terms of, could they someday be a CEO? Could they someday have the business that they want? Could they even have the confidence to apply for that new role that they've seen that is of interest to them? What would your one piece of advice to those listeners be?
Can I have two?
Yes, of course you can.
So for me, by default, the message to everyone is that you are a Ferrari. Like, that's the non-negotiable truth about everyone, is that everyone has, and it's by virtue of being human. We're just amazing creatures. So that's advice number one, is that you're just awesome. So take that as starting point. And the second piece is that, for me, the most important is to know what you want. And I think a lot of the time we get drawn into wanting things that we deep down inside don't really want. And I think if right now you're in a situation where you're not quite happy where you are, maybe it's really horrible, or maybe you're just lacking the spark. Question number one is really identifying ultra clearly what you want. And a true version of that. It's not just, I'd like to be an entrepreneur because entrepreneurs seem to have a core lifestyle that would deal better with me. It really is, what's your calling? What's your mission? Because once you know that, it's super straightforward to get it. And, when I talk about identifying what you really want, it's understanding that anything is available to you, and it really is more a question of choice. So do you want to be a CEO because you've got something to prove, or do you want to be a CEO because it's a role that's absolutely fantastic? And I could talk about that for hours, because I absolutely love my job. And do you not want to be a CEO because you've decided that CEO is out of reach for you, and that you don't look like all of the CEOs, that you don't look like what you think a CEO should look like? Or, do you have a limiting belief about that? So if you can identify honestly, truthfully, authentically what you really want, it's 100% yours for the taking.
I love that. Thank you so much, Léa. I've really enjoyed our time together today, and I know that my pretties will absolutely adore this episode. So thank you so much for joining me, and I think that's going to have to be part of our messaging now. I'm going to have to put that out somewhere that, you know, you are a Ferrari. I love it.
Or you can be a Land Rover if you prefer off-road. But yeah, everyone is top of the range.
Top of the range. I love it. Thank you so much. I hope that you will join us again sometime, and I just can't thank you enough for taking this time with me. If you're listening, pretties, I will put the details of Leadership Trust and Léa in the description, so you can go and check out this amazing company and brand. And again, just thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you, Dawn. I really enjoyed that.
If you're loving our Pretty podcast, come on over to Social Pretties, our online safe house and sisterhood community. It's a safe space where female entrepreneurs connect and thrive in a warm, welcoming fold of pretty amazing women. You'll find an easy redirect in the description, and I can't wait to see you in there. And depending on where you're listening right now, we would love it if you would click subscribe or follow so that you can be the first to know when our new podcasts come out.